Was the Department of Justice then systemically racist?
I think we look for a pattern or practice in each institution. When you talk about a specific institution, you look for its pattern and practices.
But how do you know what you know? In other words, you say an institution is systemically racist.
I didn't say any particular institution.
I know. I'm not saying you did. Yeah. I'm saying if you say an institution is systemically racist, how do you know what you know? Do you measure it by disparate impact, controlling you for other factors?
Well, the very specific...
Or do you just look at the numbers and say the system must be racist?
Well, now you've asked me a slightly different question, which I think I have a slightly different answer for.
Okay.
So welcome back to Right View Nation, the channel where truth still matters, and we don't dance around the facts. If you're tired of the left's twisted narratives, if you're sick of being lectured about your own country by elites who hate it, then you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into one of the most telling Senate exchanges I've seen in years. And believe me, what just happened exposes the entire scam behind the left's weaponized vocabulary: systemic racism, implicit bias, and the constant attack on the very fabric of America. So here we go again, another high-ranking appointee grilled under oath. And what do we hear? The same recycled, empty phrases: disparate impact, unconscious bias, patterns of discrimination. These people love to throw around academic-sounding words to make Americans feel guilty for things they never did. And when pressed, actually pressed, to define what they mean, it all falls apart like a house of cards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge, I'm really curious about your thinking on this. And I don't want my questions to be interpreted as suggestive or inconsistent with your thinking. But you and I are about the same age, I think.
I think so. That's right, Senator.
What is, when you refer to systemic racism, what is that?
I think it is plain to me that there is discrimination and widespread disparate treatment of communities of color and other ethnic minorities in this country. They have a disproportionately lower employment, disproportionately lower homeownership rates, disproportionately lower ability to accumulate wealth.
Can I stop you? Because this 5 minutes goes so fast.
I'm sorry.
So you're basically saying there's a disparate impact.
There's disparate impact, which in some cases is the consequence of historical patterns. Sometimes is the consequence of
let me ask you
unconscious bias and some kind conscious.
When you were at the Department of Justice,
yes.
Was the Department of Justice then systemically racist?
I think we look for a pattern or practice in each institution. When you talk about a specific institution, you look for its pattern and practices.
But how do you know what you know? In other words, you say an institution is systemically racist.
I didn't say any particular institution.
I know. I'm not saying you did. Yeah. I'm saying if you say an institution is systemically racist, how do you know what you know? Do you measure it by disparate impact, controlling you for other factors?
Well, the very specific...
Or do you just look at the numbers and say the system must be racist?
Well, now you've asked me a slightly different question, which I think I have a slightly different answer for.
Okay.
So cool. The authority the Justice Department has to investigate institutions is to look for patterns or practices of unconstitutional conduct. And if we find a pattern or a practice of unconstitutional conduct, I would describe that as institutional racism within that institution. That may not be the perfect definition, but that's what I would think.
So it's just a product of the numbers?
Well, if there is a pattern and a practice, this is not just a question of individual numbers. What we're looking for here under those investigations are patterns. Why is it that, a series of similar events are occurring like that? Looking into any individual's heart is not something we can do.
Who bears the burden of proving that? The institution? Or
No,
the justice?
no. Like as in all matters of law, the burden is on the investigator to prove, first by investigation, then before a court.
Is there any other way to measure institutional racism other than the numbers, the disparate impact?
Well, yes. I mean, you can look at large numbers of individual cases in which discriminatory conduct is actually found, intentional discriminatory conduct. Then it's not just a question of numbers. But, you know, if an institution has a very large number of incidents of unconstitutional conduct, the entity is responsible in the same way a corporation is responsible for the behavior of its individuals. Is the same way as
What's the difference, though, between people who are racist and an institution that's racist?
Now we do have a cosmic question, but I think institutions are made up of.
Yeah, but this is important.
I know. I'm totally with you. I totally agree with that. Corporations are nothing other than the collection of their individuals. And the same is true for a public entity, which is in a certain way a corporation.
Okay, I got to get one more in. I'm sorry, I got 24 seconds.
I'm sorry, you asked a very hard question.
Well, we can talk about this later, but I want to ask you about this concept of implicit bias.
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm a racist no matter what I do or what I think? I'm a racist, but I don't know I'm a racist?
Okay, the label racist is not one that I would apply like that. Implicit bias just means that every human being has biases. That's part of what it means to be a human being. And the point of examining our implicit biases is to bring our conscious mind up to our unconscious mind and to know when we're behaving in a stereotyped way. Everybody has stereotypes. It's not possible to go through life without working through stereotypes. And implicit biases are the ones that we don't recognize our behavior. That doesn't make you racist, no.
Who judges that? Doesn't the person judging me have his own implicit bias? How do I know his implicit bias isn't worse than my implicit bias?
I agree, but I'm not judging you, Senator, and I don't know
I'm not asking
who
you
would
to,
be judging.
But somebody, if you say you have implicit bias, that's a pejorative statement. I'm not saying you're being mean. You're not a mean guy. That's obvious. You're a nice guy. If you say somebody has implicit bias, somebody's got to make that subjective judgment, and the person making that subjective judgment has implicit bias. If it's part of being a human, then how do you know who wins?
Fair enough. But if we say that all people have implicit bias, it's not, you shouldn't take it as pejorative. This is just an element of the human condition. So you shouldn't take that as pejorative. Implicit bias is just a descriptor of the way everyone's mind works.
How about if you say that America has racists in it, just like everybody else? Does that just like everywhere else? Does that make America systemically racist?
I think I don't want to waste your time because I think this is what I said before. What I mean by systemic racism is the patterns of discrimination and disparate treatment across the country. It doesn't mean that any particular individual is a racist.
Judge, I'm in big trouble. I've gone way over.
I'm developing a bias. Thank you for the exchange.
It's a pleasure talking with you, Senator.
Same here, Judge.
Appreciate
You'll be a good attorney general.
All right, so I'd like to let the committee know that Senator
When asked what systemic racism means, this judge gave us a laundry list of statistics: lower homeownership, employment gaps, and unequal wealth accumulation. But here's the kicker. Those aren't definitions, they're results. They're outcomes. And outcomes don't equal racism unless you're already sold on the lie that America is inherently evil. Then the senator asks, was the Department of Justice systemically racist when you worked there? And what does he say? Nothing definitive. Just more babbling about patterns and practices. Because deep down, they know they can't call entire institutions racist without evidence. And they don't have any. They rely on the assumption that disparities alone are enough to indict a nation. Look, in America, we judge people based on their actions, not outcomes they can't control. You don't call a doctor a butcher because some patients don't recover. You don't call an economy racist because some people struggle. That's not justice. That's ideological warfare disguised as policy. And let's talk about this obsession with numbers. If 10% of a group doesn't succeed at something and 20% of another group does, the left immediately shouts racism. But they never consider personal choice, culture, family structure, education, or local governance. Nope. It's always the system's fault. Convenient, isn't it? You'll notice he never even answers the senator's simple question. How do you know an institution is systemically racist? He dances, he stutters, and eventually says something about looking at a large number of unconstitutional acts. Folks, that's not a standard. That's a blank check to label any institution guilty as long as they don't meet the left's ever-shifting expectations. And then, oh, this is rich, we get into implicit bias. The senator asks, does that mean I'm a racist even if I don't think I am? And the judge? He dodges it with academic mumbo-jumbo, saying, we all have biases, it's just part of being human. Okay, fine. But if everyone is biased, then guess what? No one has the moral authority to call someone else biased. The entire concept of implicit bias is unprovable, unmeasurable, and conveniently weaponized. It means you can never defend yourself, because the accusation isn't about what you did, it's about what you might think deep down. Orwellian much. Let me break it down in plain English. They want to label Americans, especially conservatives, as racist by default. And if you deny it, that just proves how racist you are. It's circular logic designed to silence dissent and make you question your own morality for loving your country. Even the senator points it out. If everyone has implicit bias, doesn't that include the person accusing you of bias? Who's the unbiased judge in this ideological court? Spoiler alert, there isn't one. That's the whole point. This is not about fairness. It's about power. Now let's deal with this myth that America is systemically racist. If that were true, if America were fundamentally built on racism, then explain this. How did we elect a black president twice? How do millions of immigrants of color succeed every day in this country? How do we have black billionaires, CEOs, mayors, senators, and Supreme Court justices? America doesn't promise equal results. It promises equal opportunity. That's what liberty means. What you do with it is up to you. And if we pretend otherwise, we're insulting every American who worked hard, overcame obstacles, and made something of themselves. Let me be clear, this isn't about equality. It's about control. The left is using race as a bludgeon to seize cultural and political power. They want to turn our legal system, our schools, our military, even our churches, into ideological training camps. And they're doing it with phrases that sound compassionate, but are anything but. They don't care about justice, they care about revolution. And if you dare to question them, you're labeled as part of the problem. Folks, we have to fight back with truth, not guilt. With courage, not submission. America is not a racist nation. It's the greatest force for freedom the world has ever seen. And if we don't stand up now, this country our ancestors built, with blood, sweat, and sacrifice, will be rewritten as something evil by people who hate it. So to all the patriots out there, share this video, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to Right View Nation. Let's keep the fire of liberty burning. Let's keep exposing the lies. And let's remind Washington and the woke mob that we the people still run this country. God bless you. God bless our troops. And God bless the United States of America.